The show that's all about the South. Welcome back. And we are going to be talking about Crooked Truth with author Kristine F. Anderson. We are Y'all Talk with a Southern accent. Good to have you back on here. I am Jon Rawl. And yes, Kristine Anderson is going to join us now from her home in Smyrna, Georgia, to talk about this novel called Crooked Truth. And this book is out on Mercer University Press. Make sure you go check out Crooked Truth. And this book is written by a Georgia-based author with Maryland ties, and she has been in the academia world for quite some time, and this is her first book. So not only is it a great novel, it's also the arrival of author Kristine F. Anderson, and Kristine is on with us right now. Welcome into the Y'all Show, Kristine.
For that generous introduction.
Yes, well, we try to be as Southern as we possibly can here, and one thing about being a Southerner is to try to be nice.
Right.
I mentioned you were from Maryland. Are you from what part of Maryland?
Well, I was actually born in Baltimore. I was actually born at Johns Hopkins Hospital.
Oh.
And then my family moved to Ohio.
Oh.
I
From the
have
south
been
to
in
the
Georgia. I've been in Georgia for most of my life.
north. Okay. So if I say, Kristine, where do you want to be known to be from? Where are you going to pick?
I would have to say the Atlanta area.
Okay. All right. Just what Atlanta needed, more people moving there. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right.
But you've been there quite some time, to your credit. All these other people moving in, they're like newbies compared to you.
Yes.
What
I have
year
been here
Yeah, go ahead.
close to 45 years.
Oh, goodness. Yes. You're a native.
A lot of change and growth.
Yes, quite a bit. And one of the things that you've done when you headed to Atlanta was you got into the academia world. You actually are a PhD. So explain what your professional background's been before going into the book world.
Well, actually, John, I have been in several different fields. I started out as an English teacher and then did go on to get a PhD because I knew I would have to have a PhD to get a better parking spot on campus. And then I have always worked as a freelance writer, so I've done a lot of newspaper and magazine work as well. And that was very helpful in writing Crooked Truth.
Yeah, Crooked Truth, again, the debut from Kristine F. Anderson, not to be confused with any other Kristine Andersons that are in the book writing world right now, because there are more than one out there.
Yes.
So what was your specialty as far as what you got your PhD in and perhaps what you went into academia teaching? What was that?
I actually got my PhD in communicative arts, and I spent most of my time teaching composition and drama courses.
I see.
I taught for a long time at Southern Poly, which is now part of Kennesaw State, and then I taught as an adjunct with Shorter College for a while.
I see, and all that is around the Marietta area. And I didn't realize,
Right.
I used to see the sign on Interstate 75, I think it was, for Southern Polytechnic. And I guess I haven't been keeping up with Georgia's higher education, but Southern Polytechnic there in Marietta, it doesn't exist anymore. It was absorbed, as you said, into Kennesaw
Right.
State, and now it's
Right.
the Kennesaw State Marietta campus, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And Kennesaw State is a massive college now there in
Yes.
Cobb County, Georgia.
Yes.
So that explains what happened to Southern Poly if you're
Right.
into academia of Atlanta and the Georgia educational system. So you did that for a long time, then you got out of it, and then it wasn't too long ago you decided to write Crooked Truth. Tell me about that evolution.
Actually, I think, John, that we are story creatures. We're wired for story. Maybe we're even addicted to story. And I think story is so much a part of who we are and our identity, especially here in the South. And I heard a story at a Labor Day cookout that we attended down in South Georgia. My husband has lots of relatives down in Stewart County, so we've spent a good bit of time down in the Lumpkin area. And one Labor Day, in between piles of chicken and ribs, an elderly relative told a story about a couple who had lived in the Lumpkin area. They were both widowed, and they married. They had children from their first marriages, grown children. She was in her mid to late 40s. He was in his mid 50s. And they married, and together they had a son. But the son was born a Mongoloid. And this was before the term Down syndrome was used. This was back in the early 30s. And he was very limited. He was hard to understand. His speech was very limited. He didn't go to school, partly because there weren't any schools available for, quote, special needs students. He was pretty much on the farm all the time. And he had an older half-brother who was very abusive and cruel to him. He called him dimwit, moron, and tormented him. And when their father died, this bullying and tormenting got even worse. And the older brother made him do all the work, the heavy work on the farm, because he was a big boy and he was strong. And things escalated, and one day things blew up. And I won't tell you what happened, but that, plus an experience I had working with a little boy who did have Down syndrome. And unlike the boy in the story, was well treated and went to public school. That experience, plus the story I heard at the cookout, became the basis of Crooked Truth. And while I was cleaning out my office during this quarantine, I actually found the notes I had scribbled down at the Labor Day cookout. The notes I took about this story my husband's relative told us while we were gobbling up ribs and chicken.
Sounds like you married a Georgia boy, is that right?
Boy with long, long roots.
Now, Kristine, if you were to pick up, and we encourage everybody to do this, pick up a copy of Crooked Truth, what is the time period this is set in again?
This starts in 1948.
Okay, just after World War
Right
II.
after World War II, and several of the characters have been involved with World War II.
I see. And what was that term you used again for Down syndrome? What was the older term? The
older term was Mongoloid.
Mongoloid.
Because people who had this condition had characteristics that often resembled what people thought were the Mongoloid people, with the small ears and the kind of slanted eyes.
Mm-hmm.
They were usually short. Sometimes they had stubby fingers. But that was the common term.
I see. Now, I showed a cover of the book, and I'm going to pull it up here again as we talk about Crooked Truth. And as you look at the cover, there is a seal or some kind of design on the top left corner. What is that?
Okay, the book, after I finished writing the book, and it actually went through many, many revisions. Crooked Truth was not the original title. Mm-hmm. And there was also a different ending in the early manuscript. But when I finally got it finished, and as I said, it went through numerous revisions, I started sending out query letters to try and find an agent. And if you want to be published by a traditional publisher, you need to have an agent representing you. Well, I probably sent out 40, maybe even 50 letters. And many of them came back with a standard, "We're not interested, this does not meet our needs." A few came back with, "Send me your first chapters." A few even said, "Send me your first 5 or 10 chapters," but no one was jumping up to represent Crooked Truth. And I was getting pretty discouraged. Well, then I found out about a contest Mercer Press
Look at there.
publishes.
Let me pull that up big. Hold on just a second. Camera 2, activate. Here we go. There we go. Look at that bear on the cover of that thing. It's a good looking
Right,
bear.
it was in the Mercer Bears.
Yeah.
Mercer Bear was sponsoring a contest called the Feral Sam's Fiction Award. And Feral Sam's, for those of you who are not Georgia born and bred, Feral Sam's was a Mercer graduate. He was an MD and he practiced in Fayetteville. Well, when he was in his mid-50s, he started writing semi-autographical stories, and they became very popular. His most famous is probably Run with the Horseman. But they talked about his life growing up in Fayetteville. And Mercer was offering a contest, an award, for the person who created a short story or a work of fiction that best described the human condition in a, quote, Southern context. So I literally, at the 11th hour, bundled up my manuscript and raced to the nearby Federal Express and sent it down to Mercer in Macon. Mm-hmm. And then I started lighting candles, offering prayers. And lo and behold, 6 months later, I got a phone call from the editor of Mercer Press, and my manuscript had received the Feral Sam's Fiction Award. Oh, talk about beginner's luck. And I got a contract for publication with Mercer. And I assumed after that my book would be out on the stands within the next 5 or 6 months. I knew very little about the publication process. It actually took about 2 more years and many more revisions and edits for Crooked Truth to actually come out in print. So it's been a long, long road with many twists and turns and some dead ends.
And just for those who might be saying, she's just showing off a blank binder there, could you kind of open that up real quick and quickly thumb through just to show off your work of how a book really comes together?
Happy to.
Yeah, look at all that.
Open it up.
Uh-oh, you're the old professor. So, and that, I mean that in a positive way. Double spaced? Is that how you do it?
Double space, right. There's a form you follow for a manuscript. And it's usually double spaced with designated margins.
Okay. See, that's why they do that when you're going through college. You gotta be building up for what maybe, just like for Kristine, ends up being your first book.
Right.
All right. So that book has come out. What was the arrival day for Crooked Truth?
About September 1st, John.
Okay, September 1st. Have you actually, because we live in a strange time, have you actually gone into a store and seen Crooked Truth on a newsstand?
No.
We gotta change that.
Right. It is available through Mercer Press, and it's also available through Barnes and Noble and Amazon.
All
And
great ways
I think bookstores can order it with Ingram.
Okay. And we're not too far away from something called Christmas, so Crooked
That's
Truth
right.
is a wonderful stocking stuffer.
Right.
And of course, you can digitally download it as well. That makes for maybe a much easier way to purchase something in the coronavirus times that we find.
Yeah, it is available on audio.
Oh, yes. Who does the audio?
Mercer.
Okay. I didn't know if your lovely voice was part of that.
No.
Well, if they ever need a good voice, they ought to call you up for something. Kristine Anderson, our special guest here on the Y'all Show, and her first book out, the novel Crooked Truth. And just like all authors, I bet you're going to tell me you got the itch now, and you're already working on the sequel.
Right. And the sequel actually picks up on two of the characters in Crooked Truth.
Oh.
Because I think most writers of fiction get very attached to their characters and they become very real.
Mm-hmm.
And two of my characters go on. One stays primarily in the South, character who is actually the narrator of Crooked Truth, and his good friend heads to the Midwest to become one of the first African American players for a professional baseball team.
Okay. And Kristine, as we kind of wrap up with you here, you're a retired professor now. You have a family and more.
Right.
I have to ask you, as someone who was a professor and probably did a lot of writing for that throughout the years, what took you so long to get this first book under wraps and have it out?
Writing a novel is very different from writing an academic paper or a magazine story or a news story. And in writing a novel, you have to create a fictitious community. You create characters with credible motives and conflicts. You create dialogue. You work in the setting and the theme. So there are a lot of different elements you're trying to pull together that you don't usually have when you're doing a news story or magazine article.
I see.
So I had to learn some new skills and really polish my craft.
And the reason I asked that question, I was just curious how long it had been in the back of your mind. Hey, I think I'm going to write a book someday. How long had that kind of been floating around there somewhere in the back of your brain?
I was still teaching when I was thinking about the book.
Okay. And here you're not teaching, so boom, it's book time. There it is, Crooked Truth, an award-winning book from Kristine F. Anderson. Check it out. Like we said, you can get it at Amazon and the other outlets. Mercer University Press is the publisher for this. And we just can't thank you enough, Kristine, for coming on the Y'all Show and promoting your first book. And we don't want to keep you. We got to get you working so you can get that second book out there.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Everybody check it out, Crooked Truth. And we appreciate Kristine for coming on the Y'all Show. More of the show about the South is coming up right after this.